Hi, professionals. Sapir Sarah Joseph here, author of Choreography of Awakening, international speaker, former Olympic figure skating coach, and founder and creator of imagintlife, a revolutionary path to mastery of self that leads towards creation of your masterpiece, the life you were born to live according to your life's blueprint. Welcome to Professionals on Air podcast, a podcast where we discuss how to walk, talk, live, and grow authentically as a professional in the 21st century. It is my intention to bring you diverse and exciting speakers and prove that no matter where we come from and what we do, there are clear laws that work through us all that we can tap into to create what we desire. And today, I have the pleasure and honor to introduce you to my amazing guest from Savannah, Georgia, Victoria Baylor. Victoria is a certified mindset and clarity coach, TEDx speaker, number one Amazon bestselling author, columnist for several publications, and podcast host herself. She lives her mission of supporting professionals with building strong mindset and authentic personal brand that allows them to showcase their value, elevate their opportunities, and make a huge impact in their work and in the world. Welcome, Victoria. Thank you so much for your generosity and gift of time and wisdom to share with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sophia, and thank you for that warm welcome. And I'm really impressed. I actually didn't know you had an ice skating background as a coach. That's impressive.
Yeah, and we're like in the middle of the Olympics right now, right? With all the
Yeah.
craziness. Yeah, Victoria, tell us a little bit about what you do and how did you get started?
Oh, well, isn't that always the loaded question? I think as a coach, it's always fun to kind of unpack people's stories. But I have a story myself. Essentially, I guess I could tell it to you in story form. My story pretty much started when I was 8 years old, and I actually at one point prior to that wanted to be an ice skater. When I realized I have the legs, but I don't have the the flexibility or any other kind of talent related to that. I set my eyes on the sciences, and at 8 years old, I saw Jacques Cousteau for the first time. It slapped me in the face, and I realized I wanted to be a marine biologist. So
Mm,
fast forward through high school, college, all of that. Well, to college, I went to school for marine science. Was able to get a great internship while I was there, travel and do really great research as an undergraduate. When I graduated from school, the I guess the best pathway that was paved for me was to go right into the research I had started, and for 15 years I did that. Well, that's where my story gets a little bit interesting, and that's where my TEDx talk kind of picks up on how I ended up where I am here and now, because I kind of hit a little bit of a brick wall. So, as I've come to understand, life is like a book, there are several chapters to it. And I was getting to the end of my chapter in research, and I really didn't know what to do with myself outside of that. Long story short, I started to deal with confidence issues, challenges, identity issues, because I had always identified by the role I played, and I never took the time to really authentically establish who I was as a person apart from
mm,
that role. So my TEDx talk is "You are who you are, not what you do." So I did what comes natural to me and what I've now come to realize is my superpower and gift, which is unpacking people and developing programs to help people do that. Well, I turned that gift on myself, being highly analytical and creative, and I was able to get down to the bottom of who is Victoria. And that's where I discovered all along that I'd always been a coach. People had always pulled me to the side. They were always seeking the kind of advice, the insight that I gave. And I was always a natural cheerleader. And through that trajectory and some other things that was kind of neat that happened, a side entrepreneurial business where I was making, it was a gown maker. All these things kind of converged like a rope. And it got me to the place where I realized that really I want to empower people for a living. So got certified in coaching, training. I've had extensive experience helping people through tough situations. And now I funnel all my time and energy as being a mindset and clarity coach. So I work with professionals and entrepreneurs, really making sure that they are on a pathway to achieve the success they desire, achieve their goals, and working with them to move out any obstructions or obstacles, mindset challenges, and giving them the clarity they need to know the steps they need to take. So I love it. I'm a speaker on the same topics of personal development, personal branding, and mindset. And of course, I coach in those topics. And later this year, I'm getting into organizational development where I will be able to take more of what I do into corporations and businesses like that to do help, to help and assist on a higher level. So, absolutely love it. And that's a little bit about me and what I do.
That's such a great story. I love how people like come to that point where all of a sudden they were doing like this one thing and you were thinking this is what I'm here for, and then something like clicks and all of a sudden your path just makes a complete different, a U-turn basically, right? And then
Well, if I may, what's very interesting about that, and I tell my clients this, I really do believe that we think we're so different in sometimes the chapters. But what's interesting is I like to think of us all as being like a golden thread that runs through tapestry. So you can have a thread start at the bottom and it just kind of weaves its way throughout your entire life. We oftentimes don't know what that thread is. And essentially that lends itself to the thought of kind of how we're wired, what our inclinations are. I've always been a problem solver. I just didn't know that. And it's funny because I still do the same thing today. What attracted me to the ocean was looking beneath the surface. We go to the beach and we play, but something in my mind wanted to understand what happens underneath. What's crazy is I do the same thing with people. There's a surface to people, but I'm drawn to what happens underneath. So I switched from marine science to behavioral science. And and I think for people, I think it's a relief when they know that I think we tend to put so much onus into the what we're doing. But when you really kind of understand the mechanics of the who you are, you realize that that is a toolkit that you can take to different environments and use it uniquely. That part of you doesn't change. And that is the core essence of what makes you great, not so much the what you're doing. So that was a really strong lesson for me to learn. And that's one I emphasize with my clients is really understanding themselves on a foundational level.
I dearly, dearly hear you on that. And it's so true. And I hear how the metaphor of ocean applies so well too, because you can be on the surface or you study that ocean really deep in, right? Going
Mm-hmm.
all the way to the bottom. I mean, that's what we truly are. And I hear how you're saying that, like, I used to coach figure skating, and so people knew me as ice coach, and now I coach water, and the ice melted. So you could see it as kind of two different things, but it is a continuation because
Mm-hmm.
our soul evolves from one state into another, and so it is part of the evolution. Victoria, what would you? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
Okay, what would you say professionalism mean to you?
Well, to me, that's a really good question. I think it really is, wow, that's a really loaded question too. It's the foundation upon which everything is built. And I feel like it's the containment and the structure by which you can build yourself out as a person. Obviously, I focus a lot on branding, and professionalism is woven all into that. I think it's a way in which you can communicate. It's almost like a standard across the board that really kind of solidifies that um, who you are and how you're to be taken seriously and how you're to present yourself. And I think it's kind of like a universal language in essence. It might sound a little bit weird, but I see things in pictures. So I can kind of see that as kind of oftentimes that unspoken language, but it's felt so strongly from one person to another. And it really can seal the deal on whether you have credibility, the way people see you. And to me, that parallels personal branding so well because your personal brand is your image and your reputation. And one of the characteristics that you want it to be is highly professional, because that is, again, kind of like that platform that's going to inform people how they should approach you and what they can expect from you and how to engage with you.
I love that. You know, it's really cool to hear in this, like doing this interview, and we had people from all over the place, from Australia, from, well, here we have across the US, right? And you people from Europe. And to hear how people relate to what professionalism means to them and how how many points are, like you're saying, universal, and then there are some other points that would come up and you're like, wow, never even thought about it that way. So it's really awesome to get such a perspective and diversify our view of life and ourselves. And at the end of the day, it always keeps coming back to, it comes back to who you really are in the heart.
I would
What
definitely
would
agree
you,
with that. Hmm.
what is your biggest strength as a professional?
You know, you asked me if you had asked me that a few years ago when I was kind of stuck 10 years ago. And I think the funniest thing about strengths is you use them and you don't oftentimes know what they are. But to answer your question, uh, I would consider my biggest strength is my actually it's kind of a dual strength. It's my analytical capabilities and my intuitive nature to feel and sense people. And I think they almost morph into one thing because in order I think to really properly analyze, it's one thing to observe something, but it's a whole nother thing to be able to observe it and then to step into the shoes of someone. It's the difference between being one dimensional and three dimensional. And you know, it's a gift I always had, and I just really used it and didn't notice it. But it's just kind of cool to hone in on it and to actually use it intentionally. So I would definitely say those are my kind of like my superpowers.
Hmm. So how do you know when it's intuition versus wishful thinking?
That's a very good question. You know, it's funny. I had a mastermind group I was with for about 8 or 9 years. Really great group, great sisters, and I didn't realize then. So intuition is one of the, you know, sometimes people say it's weird, and then sometimes people say that no, it really is a collection. I think when I was doing a little bit of reading in NLP, um, and I have a little bit of background in that myself, that it's kind of a collection of stored memories, insights, thoughts, things like that, that your brain is just really relying on it. And I think for me, I rely heavily on patterns. I don't know, I've always been able to see patterns in behavior, occurrences, and my brain can target those and like quickly collect those together. So that versus wishful thinking, I think an unchecked intuition that's just allowed to run wild without kind of having the proper checks and balances can lead you down that road. But I believe it's one of those kind of capabilities and gifts that if you adjourn it, if you attach it with a little bit more of the logical side, just to kind of check and balance it, maybe run it by someone, that helps to strengthen the insight. So I think it is a delicate, it's a delicate dance. Where
I loved how you can zoom in into that. We had this question when I was getting my master's degree in spiritual psychology, and someone asked this question to my teachers, and they said, "Well, so how do you tell the difference between intuition versus wishful thinking?" And my teacher would say, "If it comes to be, then it was intuition, and if it doesn't, then it was wishful thinking."
that's an even better way to judge that. That's funny. That's a good point.
What would you say your biggest weakness as a professional is, and how do you deal with that?
Oh, that's easy. That's a characteristic of my personality type. Is I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. So just kind of part of how I'm wired is I tend to do things at a very high level. I didn't even know what a high achieving person was. That's why I really hone in and work as a coach with high achieving individuals. Definitely my weakness is it used to be like paralysis of analysis, which comes from trying to make sure you're picking the right method, the right way to get something accomplished. I've since handled that because I think mindfulness is about all about being aware. So when you're logically aware, when you're consciously aware of the issue or challenge you're having, it's easier to kind of pinpoint and see it. So I love the whole 80/20 rule because I know that in my case, if I do 80%, that really is technically probably compared to other people, it might be like 110%. So it's just a way to trick my brain and say, okay, Victoria, don't go into 100%. Just do it at 80% because it'll never get done. And I'm,
Mhm.
I'm in my 40s. You make enough mistakes, you kind of learn yourself. It's like, I'm not going down that road. And then I think it comes back to trust. So when you
Mm.
authentically kind of understand your personality type, you understand what your strengths are, you can focus your energy that. And I think it becomes less about becoming perfect, because when you're aware of what you're good at, you don't really have to strive for perfection. I've told my clients, strive for excellence. It's a lot easier to achieve and it's not unrealistic. So it's that whole mindset shift, I think, that's kind of kept
Mhm.
my perfectionism in check these last few years. And I'm happy for it, because it can drive anybody crazy.
This is a big one because if you don't keep that in check, that's like a fast road to burnout too.
It is, and there's so many, and this is where I love as a coach, because of, and again, just maybe the levels, and I'm sure you can relate, just seeing it on, because there's so many different planes of thought in regards to like perfectionism, and there's so many different ways to put out that fire. I tell my clients all the time, and I love it. I joke with my clients. I said, your scale is broke. And I kind of use the analogy of, if you're at the grocery store and we weigh our veggies and fruits on scales. Imagine taking a jackfruit to a scale, putting it on a scale, and it reads 1 pound. We all know jackfruits aren't 1 pound. They're at least 15,
Mhm.
20. They're heavy. I think with a lot of high achieving individuals, their scales are off. And because they can't weigh their own achievements, they can't weigh their own efforts, they tend to underestimate it. So I said the best way to do it is toss your scale out, use someone else's. So I always
So
encourage
how do you calibrate the scale?
people. Well, you use someone that you know that has like a really good calibration. So whether it's a mentor, a coach, someone that has a means of understanding where you are, what you're doing. Mentors are obviously really good if they're working in the same arena or environment, and then they can judge or be that sounding board to reflect back how you did. So when I give talks, I've given a TEDx talk, I talk all the time. I don't always think I give the ultimate talk. It's just in my brain, because I can always process my talk. I can see how I did. Oh, I could have did this. I could have did that. I know it's a good talk. But if I really want to get down to the crux of how well I did, it's not really about my opinion anyway. And I think that's where we get stuck, because we get so stuck in our head and it really is about the people that were the recipient. What was their response? And I think that echo, that feedback, is what allows us to grow. And sometimes when you are in perfectionism, some people can be so insecure, they don't know how to accept or look for that feedback and use it. They tend to self internalize and think, oh, well, because I didn't do it the right way the first time, or because it fell short, I'm doomed. So I don't have to tell you, you understand mindset very well. It's all of that kind of, ball of yarn. You kind of got to move out the way so that people can get what they get and get over their mindset challenges.
I think this is something you just said, like not doing it right the first time. And the question for me is coming out, how do you actually know that you didn't do it right the first time? Maybe that was right the way you did it. It was supposed to be exactly that way.
That's a very good question. I think it comes down to intention. So if what you intended to happen didn't really happen, like for instance, if I gave a talk and I wanted it to land in a certain way or be perceived, and I talked to a couple people and get feedback, and they said, "Well, I kind of missed what you were trying to say." Then from that standpoint, is I can deduce that, okay, well, maybe I should try another strategy to make sure it gets there. That's less about the self blame, self focus, and it's more about how do I improve? Because I think that's all what life is really. It's about, even if you come at it a high level, there's always great room for improvement. I love to focus on, I don't know if you've ever seen Twitter's first logo. So everybody knows Twitter, you leave your little tweets. If you Google their first logo, it is the most horrendous thing I think I've ever looked at. It's like green jelly, and it's written Twitter, and it has like it looks like slime. Now, we're all used to seeing that cute little bird that represents like the little tweet, but that's a very good question. Did Twitter fail their first iteration? Depends on who you ask. But the important part is they didn't stay where they were at. They either received feedback, they kept molding and shaking and shaping it to get it to a place where whatever their desired result is achieved. And some of that was feedback, their own internal, you get what I'm saying? So it is a delicate dance, but I feel like it's not one that needs to be processed in a vacuum. I think
Mm.
your feedback, other people's feedback, is what really allows that tug and pull, and it really produces growth.
Really, because it happens so often, right? That it is that thing that you failed in is actually the biggest thing that allowed you to grow. So
Mhm.
if you got it right the first time, you would have never achieved the higher level as a result of that failure.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
I know when I was coaching my skaters long time ago, and my parents, not my parents, my students' parents, they would be like, "How come when your student is standing? Why is it the only time only your students stay on the top of the podium and cry?"
Oh,
But because I would be like, I would try to find something that was not perfect for so that they don't stay there and celebrate and they don't want to work anymore. So there has to be like that room where you want to step in and grow more rather than just being the winner all the time. And that was you know a good point. Like for me, it was like first place is the worst place to be. Second, third place is the best because you did well, you got your medal, but just not good enough. So there is still that level of hunger to reach more.
you know, and I think it comes down to just personal goals, because I work with male men and women, but the women that I work with, they have the opposite problem, and it is extreme. They can't celebrate. They won't
Mhm.
celebrate. So they're first all the time, but to them it's never enough. And I think that's why I find I have a very interesting kind of relationship with the word failure. And I know it can mean different things to different people, which is awesome. We're allowed to kind of give it its denotation, or yes, its connotation. Denotation is dictionary meaning, but we're allowed to assign a meaning to it. Um, and I think the hardest thing I have, which was my challenge, which is type of women I work with. I've seen this in some men, but really like in the women, because it's just kind of getting them to have a unique. I don't believe in a balance. Sometimes is a word, but alignment between owning what they've done and then being able to still want to improve without killing the process they've made. Because their problem is, because they can't see what they've done, nothing they do is ever good enough. And I think it's so important that, in order to give them some kind of way to calibrate their
Mhm.
procedures, and you get what I'm saying, they have to have something. And I was that way. Because things came easy, school, it was like, honor graduate through school and college. I didn't see that as a big deal, so I didn't give credibility to it. But when you don't give credibility to it, you actually rob yourself of confidence, because your confidence is gained from your self assuredness of your unique talents, traits, capabilities. It's like putting money in the bank. You can have the check, but if you never deposit the check, then you won't have anything to withdraw from. So I always had these clients that would be working with 500, Fortune 500 companies. They'd be high up on the ladder. And I would simply ask them, why did the company hire you? And they would go blank. They have no idea why they were hired. And that's very interesting, because that's like being on that podium with the medal and being like, how did I get this again?
Mhm.
And it is a weird, delicate balance, because you do want people to own where they're at. You're absolutely right, but not lose that desire and drive to grow. How do you keep that
So
in connection?
do you see that as a big issue that people do not reside in the present moment and that's why they feel that I'm not good enough because they are either being stuck in the past or they're looking into unrealistic future and cannot find that place of being in the present moment, and that's the place of true assessment. This is who I am, and I am perfect the way I am in this moment right now. It doesn't mean that tomorrow I'm going to be in the same place or should be in the same place. Tomorrow will change. But today, in this moment right now, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be and is exactly perfect.
That would be nice. I find that with the people I work with, and again, that's why I think I love the higher achievers are kind of my thing because I can understand the way they think. I'm a lot similar. I think it's one of their biggest issues is normalizing everything they do.
Mm,
When you don't think what you do is unique, you think every single person on the planet can do exactly what you do, that takes the fire out of it. That takes the authenticity for you and who you are out of the equation. That makes you mundane. So it makes sense to me that they would proceed in life with it doesn't matter if I do, I don't, or if I do, everybody else benefits. I'm not getting anything out of this. I think we were made to feel that type of self, what's the word for it? We were made to feel that sense of self satisfaction. I was telling my husband this other day, and I don't know,
fulfillment.
yeah, I don't understand electronics, but I do understand circuits enough to know that it's not about just us giving of ourselves and shooting out that energy. I feel like it's supposed to be a loop. What I give out is supposed to impact people. The feedback of that impact is supposed to come back to me. I'm invigorated by seeing what I did and the difference I make. I give out more of that energy, and then it just kind of loops around. And I find that for a lot of people, it's not a loop, it's just a straight line, and they're
Hmm.
exhausted. They're constantly giving out. They'll get a thank you, but they don't get that fulfillment back. And
Mm,
then when you don't really understand who you are, then you have a tendency to overcompensate, to really step outside of who you are and start to be other people and stuff. Just a whole plethora of issues. So the normalization thing is really neat. That's why when I work with clients, the first line of action is to get clear on their identity and to see what sets them apart, and then you can build anything off of that platform once you get them to prescribe to that.
mm. Well, you said something earlier. You said something like, I don't believe in balance. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, because I tried it, and I think I have a very the downfall of my logical mind is when you use a word, I tend to take it very serious. So balance to me means equal parts. And what I had to grow to realize, because I am a wife, I'm a mother, I have a 14-year-old daughter, is a high schooler, freshman. I'm busy and involved in my community. I sit on boards. I have a very busy church life, and I would try to kind of balance it all out. And I would go through cycles of that and fail miserably. And there's only so much that you can do, and you just start to kind of get disheartened and a little bit bitter. And it took me some time. This is years ago before I even started coaching. It just took me some time to realize that it's not really about balance. Because even in a marriage, you don't have balance. There's times that I might have to pull a little bit more than my husband, or vice versa. But what you can have is alignment, and what alignment means is that everything fits together, and the goal is that it's supposed to achieve something. So there are times in my business where it's a little bit more energy going, but that still aligns. It doesn't take away from the love that I have for my family, or it doesn't take away from the other things. They all fit. And there's just it's like the tide, there's just the ebb and flow. And I find that when I'm not trying to force everything to be equal parts, block, square, circle, that is less stress on me. And I think what it does force us to do as anybody is to decide it's not really about balance, it's really about prioritizing.
Mm,
That's a whole nother, everything can't go down the same tube side by side. What if the tube narrows? What goes first? What goes second? What goes third? And the downside to human nature is sometimes we don't want to do that. We want to be able to do it all. And prioritizing requires you to get clear on your values. It requires you to get clear on realistically about how does your energy work? How do I function as a person? I'm not a
mm,
night owl. I'm a morning. So it's different mechanics like that. And I think when we aren't brave enough to take on that and realize that we have limitations, which is the biggest thing, and then how strategically get smart on how to deal with those limitations, we rob ourselves of having that alignment and that fulfillment.
mm. This is such a great conversation to like keep going further with it. But we could like talk for hours and hours
Yeah.
about that because we're just diving in more into the alignment, more into the limitations, more into all of these things. And for that night now, I want to ask you, what has you, um, what is one thing that has you most fired up right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I love that's a really good question because I think that's one of those questions when you're trying to figure out what makes you what you're passionate about. I know I've asked questions like that, like what really gets you fired up. I think for me, well, the thing that gets me fired up overall, just two things, is and what makes me do what I do is when people don't see their gifts, they don't see their strengths. Because it's always been weird for me because I can, in having a conversation, I can just pick them up, and then I start asking questions, and it's always weird because it's like, wait, you didn't see that? It's like a comment just shot, like you didn't see, but people don't. So that's kind of like my overall thing. That is what gets me up in the, out of the bed every morning. I believe that God's given us all unique gifts, and that's what makes my feet hit the ground. And it's like, I know my purpose and call is to help people realize that. But in the current climate, what really has me kind of like agitated is um, just the overwhelm that
Mm,
exists with people in general. And again, a lot of times I focus, just professionals across. I think we can say professionals across the board because there's so many people that are not only just working their jobs and careers, their family people, and then with things going on with COVID, it's impacted how kids do their school, and then there's just been a lot of weight added onto individuals. And I think people in the past have been able to get away with kind of not knowing themselves, not just kind of moving things along. And I feel like that added weight is really starting to show where the cracks were. And I can definitely tell from a clientele standpoint, I have a lot of those conversations where people they're just throwing their hands up. They're like, I can't take anymore, because it's becoming very obvious that, look, I don't have the energy to waste. I don't have the brain power to waste. It's all being sucked up. How can I give myself cushion? How can I give myself some kind of reprieve? And I think when you get to the point of those kind of challenges, which I think is a beautiful thing, not the challenge themselves,
mhm,
but as human beings, we don't change unless we're motivated to do so. We all know that,
mhm.
unless there's some kind of pain or gain involved. I'm guilty. It wasn't until I gained my, 15 pounds COVID fluff that I was like, wait, that's not me. And of course, I took the necessary action and got rid of it. But it's not until it's uncomfortable, right? You're walking up the stairs and you're like, I used to not be that winded. So I think it's really neat that people are asking us questions, but that has me very kind of hyper vigilant and watchful and sensitive and empathetic, because I realize that people are like that rope that's down to, it was like three intertwined, and now it's down to like one on one and starting to pull apart. It's a lot.
Mm. Victoria, imagine that your name changed today and you are no longer called Victoria, and you have to choose a new name out of these four: success, trust, courage, or passion. Which of these names would you choose, and what would change in in your life as a result?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, well, my word for the year is bold. So I would, trust is kind of a normal part of my being and makeup. So I don't feel like that would be a change. I would go for courage because I
Courage?
feel, yeah, I
Courage.
think,
So your name is now Courage Baylor.
yes.
So Miss
Um,
Courage, that becomes your name. As your name changed now and you're Courage, what changes in your life?
what's interesting is Victoria means victory, and I kind of
Yeah.
like translate that victory in God. And you can't have victory without a fight. I
Hmm.
think changing it to courage means that you run head on into more fights, so you can have more victories. So the thing I love about courage is I don't think we any of us could have enough of it. It's about really turning up the heat. If you want the pot to boil, you got to turn up the fire. So um, I think for me, what changes is what I feel like is already in a line for me to go in the direction of, which is like my word of the year, the whole boldness, the whole go out there, the whole I think you probably feel like you have the same responsibility. Our job as the people that come alongside and we're thought partners with people, not to tell them what to do, not any of that. That's not what coaching is. But our job oftentimes is to find the people because a lot of people don't. I don't know about you. I know when I was not operate, when I was a bit lost and was having an identity crisis, I think I was the last person to know what was happening
Hmm.
because when you're so busy, you're so used to conquering and making things happen. It's almost like a weird downwards fall that happens, and you don't know how you end up at the bottom of the pit. And then you try what you normally do, and you realize, like, wow, that's is not more action that I need. It's more self-realization. It's more this, that, and the other. So my courage would focus on turning up the heat on what I'm doing already, and going into the places because working with high achieving individuals, you kind of got to go bear hug them and with love, much love. But again, being one myself, you don't notice what's happening. So it takes courage to go in and, really just try to help people get what they need. Um, because I'm happy for the people that have done that for me and for having the courage to do that for myself.
And so let it be so.
I would say,
And so be it.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Well, my question is for the audience. Imagine that your name changed today and you have to choose a new name out of these four: success, trust, courage, or passion. Which of these names would you choose and what will change in your life as a result? Write your chosen word in the comments or send me a message and receive a gift from me. And you can see how Victoria chose courage and what would happen. And maybe you want to choose courage as well, or maybe something else. All right, Victoria, thank you so, so much. It was such a great interview. I loved your sharing, your passion, your confidence, and wisdom. It was just really, really such a great contribution. Thank you.
Thank you
And
for having me. It was an honor talking to you. I enjoyed it very much.
where would people find you?
Oh, it's easy. I'm self-branded. So victoriabaylor.com, website. You can go on Instagram, Facebook. Everything's under the name Victoria Baylor, minus Twitter, which is Victoria D, as in like Daisy Baylor. My middle name isn't Daisy. So yep, by name, and please feel free to reach out if you want to email me. My email is victoria@victoriabaylor.com. I always love to hear from other people and get feedback. I don't bite. I love people just out of the honesty of my heart, and I love to see people succeed and grow. So feel free to reach out.
Well, we'll put all of this information in the comments below. Okay,
Okay.
so people can see it in the comments. Put your website and the email. And I hope you guys reach out to Victoria. She doesn't bite, so
So,
it'll be helpful for you to connect. And professionals, thank you so much for tuning into our show, the Professionals on Air podcast, a podcast where we discuss how to walk, talk, live, and grow authentically as a professional in the 21st century. To learn about Victoria, visit her website, victoriabaylor.com, right? And it's going to be posted in the comments. Visit so make sure you go there and receive a gift from me. Type in one of the four words: success, trust, passion, or courage in the comments or send me a message. And get ready for surprise next Wednesday. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Thank you so much for being with us. Ciao.
bye.